Directors Osborne, Dwyer, Veerkamp, and Zini, and Day present. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, Clerk to the Board Sullivan, present.
All right, would you please all stand and join, let's see, let's have the 49er Victor lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance
All
today.
right.
Alan?
Loud and proud. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Had they lost, I think we probably would have to have a moment of silence. All right, adoption of the agenda. Jen? Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
How about a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Public? Anybody? Don't see anybody out here. Jen, anybody on behind the scenes?
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. At this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Communications. General Manager?
I have two recognitions today. The first one, we received a note from Linda Alvarez, one of our customers, that complimented our distribution operator, Joe Beal, for his outstanding customer service. Again, this is just another thank you letter from our customers providing excellent service. Also, I'd like to take a moment, on your agenda, you'll see an emergency item. Over the last several weeks, our operations staff performed extremely well in very difficult situations with all the rain and the storm and the mud and the, 8 to 10 inches of rain. I just want to do a big shout out to all the operations staff for all their efforts in providing safe, reliable water and wastewater services to our customers. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Echo that. Any board members want to chime in on that one? That was major. Yep. Okay. Yes, sir.
Could I have an IT person, please? Probably computer operator error.
All right.
Can we have somebody from the help desk come up and help Director Osborne? But we'll continue moving on. Thank you.
Okay, public comment. Public comment section of the agenda. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak? No, your time is coming though, I'm sure.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This is the open public comment period for any items not appearing on today's agenda. President Veerkamp, it does not appear at this time that any members of the public are wishing to speak.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Communications, General Manager, please. Jim.
No items today. Thank you.
Okay. Clerk of the board? Anything?
None today, thank you.
Any board members? Yes, Alan, please.
Just, I don't know whether it's worth an article for Jesse or not, but I had noticed it before earlier this year, and then especially with the rains, a lot of comments about, oh, the drain swale through our development is flooding or along our backyard, our shared drain swale is flooding, and call EID. And so I don't know if customer service gets many calls like that. If we might want to look into it. If they do, that might be a worthwhile FYI. I don't believe we do that.
No, we don't.
So.
Yeah, might be a good opportunity to educate.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes, Director Osborne.
I just wanted to thank Carl, Mr. Parks, Superintendent, keeping me, a lot of people calling me and emailing me and texting me, wanting to know the status of Sly Park. And he let me know at 4:10 10 in the morning on Tuesday morning when it spilled. So our water supply and recreation are in great shape for the next summer.
Great. Yeah, Pat?
Thank you. Yes, just wanted to say hats off to Jim Abercrombie and Jesse and the staff for the article on the waterfront, which also got published in the Mountain Democrat, emphasizing that we're not a Wall Street business, investor-owned, we're customer-owned. I thought that was a very good article and well done, so thank you both. And then I'll just pile on or chime in about your comments concerning our staff and the response to the bomb cyclone or whatever, big rainstorm. You know, that I'd like to point out that was also on a New Year's Eve, you know, taking people away from whatever kind of celebrations they might have and putting them out in the middle of the rain and the mud to fix all those things, and outstanding performance. I don't think any other organization could have done it any better.
Yeah. Thank you, Director Dwyer, very much appreciate that comment. I'm sure that would be. Yes. Director Renzini.
Happy New Year, everyone. And as all the directors have said here, the staff, I think, is commendable that you strive through that big weekend. Myself was sheltered in with no power, and then our water heater broke. We had to wait 2 days to get that replayed. But all my neighbors underneath me at the bottom of Cameron Park were receiving the water. It was running down the side of my house. So it was clearly, if you're living on a hill, you kind of feel a little guilty when all that water goes down and it's caught in the flatter areas of our drainage areas. But I do have to compliment the information regarding getting people to not drink the water temporarily. That was well done. Everybody got a text message who had their customer service account updated. I appreciate the fact that was well done. And then it was just as if Xfinity sending me the same thing faster than PG&E, that my electricity was off and that my Xfinity wasn't working. So we had a very interesting beginning of a new year. And compliments to staff and compliments to everybody who held it together. And thank you.
You know, just one point of clarification, during that time, the turbidity was so high, we asked for voluntary conservation, not a don't drink water, but it was just voluntary conservation because of the filtering issues we got. But thank you very much for the compliments.
Just last week, somebody said, "Can I start taking more showers?" And I said, "I think they let you know you don't have to conserve anymore, but, you know."
Yeah, well, very good and very well said by everybody. I got just a couple quick things. On January 11th, I participated in the county water agency meeting until they went to closed session. Nothing really earth-shattering there. On the 19th, I did also listen in on the RWAs, had with their executive director, Jim Pfeiffer, and they had Felisa Marquez, former chief of or director of State Water Resource Control Board. Very interesting conversation and emphasis on beavers. I don't quite know.
Good job.
I know, mammal beaver,
But they-
yeah, related to water storage. Gosh, you know, I think they'd be better to build with concrete and bulldozers, but anyway, whatever, it was a very interesting webinar. And then this Wednesday's LAFCO, 5:30, and we'll be working on mid-year budget, the strategic planning committee members, as well as election of officers. So that's it for me. All right, we're on to the consent calendar. We have a motion for the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion from the public? Any discussion from the board? We will go ahead then.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This is any comment for the approval of the consent calendar, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Dwyer. President Veerkamp, it does not appear at this time there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the approval of the consent calendar. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. We are on to our information items. Item 11, finance. Jamie?
Good morning, President Camp, members of the board, Jamie Bandy, Director of Finance. I'm here this morning to review the cost of service analysis process. Next slide. So staff is preparing to conduct a cost of service analysis this year. The analysis will be reviewed with the board and the public throughout the process to obtain feedback and direction. Next slide now. Okay. So the California Constitution, specifically Proposition 218, consists of requirements that the district must adhere to when considering whether to increase its water, wastewater, and recycled water rates. The cost of service analysis assists in developing rates that meet but do not exceed the costs required to provide each service. There are certain sources of information that are important in conducting the analysis, including budgets, master planning documents, the district's 5-year capital improvement plan, as well as the district's 5-year financial plan. Next slide, please. This is just a quick graphical illustration of the components included in the analysis. The information sources that I just described help to define the revenue requirements necessary to conduct the cost analysis. It's then necessary to functionalize the costs so that they can be allocated equitably between the district's 3 utilities. And then several factors are considered in the next step, which is the rate design, which we'll look at in more detail later in the presentation. Next slide. The board recently adopted its 2023 to 2024 operating budget. This is just a simplified illustration of the anticipated revenues and expenses, debt service, as well as the cash available for capital projects. Next slide. The district is currently updating the water master plan, which also,
Can I
yes.
stop you there?
Sure.
Can you go back one? Thanks. Cash available for capital projects, that's our PAYGO projects. We're doing a lot of other capital projects that are being paid for under the debt service of our bond issue. Just wanted to make that clear.
Correct. Yeah, this graph here does not include the anticipated bond issuances in the future. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the district's currently updating the water master plan, which also includes an analysis of the recycled water utility. And to the extent needed, the water master plan, as well as the wastewater facilities master plan, will be utilized as necessary to inform the 2023 cost of service analysis. The district's capital improvement plan is a 5-year planning document that identifies projects aimed to maintain and improve service reliability, addressing areas such as the life cycle replacement of assets, health and safety, as well as legal and regulatory mandates. Next slide. Just a snapshot of the 2023 to 2027 capital improvement plan recently adopted by the board. Next slide. Okay, so the 5-year financial plan is used to balance operational financing needs with capital needed to fund the ongoing capital improvement plan. Listed below are benefits of that long-term financial plan. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides it just indicates what our administrative regulation sets the goals and objectives for the financial plan. I won't read through each of them. This is included in the district's AR. Next slide, please. And one more.
Hang on before we switch this one. One of the reasons we're updating the cost of service study was the forecast in our financial plan. I'm sorry, go forward one. Thank you. We didn't maintain our cash reserves at that level. That was shown in the financial plan, so we're updating the cost of service study to increase our cash reserves to that level. And then also the debt service level, we weren't going to be achieving that in future years as well. So those are the two main reasons we're updating the cost of service study.
Thank you. Okay, so as discussed during the approval of the 2023-2024 operating budget and financial plan, staff faced a number of challenges in preparing the plan. Some of those results, as Jim pointed out, included projection of low debt service coverage and low cash reserves. Forecasted rate revenue is not high enough to fund the CIP and maintain adequate cash reserves, as well as lower projections of the FCC revenue. In an effort to collectively combat the challenges, some of the responses include cuts and deferrals to the operating budget and reduction of the CIP expenditures. Also, we initially anticipated a $100 million bond issuance in 1 year that we went ahead and separated into 2 bond sales between 2024 and 2026. Also, as just mentioned, even with these efforts and in light of the ongoing economic conditions, the proposed plan showed the need for greater rate increases than previously identified. Next slide, please. So in order to allocate the costs equitably between the utilities, several factors need to be considered. Next slide, please. These factors include the allocation of property taxes, water rate revenue-based charges, allocation of debt service coverage, as well as overhead charges. Next slide. So we'll take a look at each of these individually briefly. So the allocation of property taxes, our past practice was 60% to water utility and 40% to wastewater utility. These percentages are similar to our water-only accounts, which is about 64%. Next slide. So in 2009, the district adopted a more aggressive water conservation structure designed at that time to collect 30% of the rate revenue from fixed and base charges and 70% of revenue from the volumetric charges. During the 2010 cost of service analysis, the board did reallocate that to a 50-50 ratio. After determining that meeting the revenue requirements of the district were too volatile when the water conditions varied, or when the water varied due to the weather conditions. And the district has maintained this 50-50 ratio since then. Our allocation of debt service, the debt service is allocated based upon the bond documents when originally issued and cannot be reallocated. And then our debt service coverage, as we've mentioned before, the bond covenants require the district to obtain a 1.25 coverage. Our administrative regulation also sets the financial goal of the debt coverage at 1.7 to 2.0 times, including the FCC revenue, and then just 1.25 times without the FCC revenue. The same AR also requires that rates generate enough net revenue to also adequately fund the pay-as-you-go projects. Okay, and then lastly, the overhead charges. These are program charges not directly supporting a specific utility. They're based upon the ratio of directly assigned personnel within a single utility. Some examples here would be our general manager, HR, IT, and legal. Next slide. Okay, the following 2 slides list the principles for guiding the rate-setting process. Again, there's 12 of these over the next 2 slides, so I won't necessarily read through each of them. Next slide, Jennifer. And one more.
Jamie, while you're on that, on the principles, while we do our workshops, I hope we look at this and use this to help guide us, so that it's not just something we stick in the report and then don't really think about it. I mean, for instance, if we can, the more we can do to simplify our rate structure, to make it easier to understand, that would be something I think would be useful. And it's not necessarily materially going to affect rates, but just the more we can do to simplify it, to make it more understandable. So that's just one example that's in one of our principles.
Yes, thank you. And as we go through the process and we continue to provide updates to the community and to the board, we will definitely make sure that we're following each of these guidelines and really highlighting that as we go.
And I think bringing on that, a new consultant to give a fresh look at that will definitely provide these rate-setting principles to the consultant so that they can maybe give us some good ideas on how to do that. And just as a reminder, I believe the board adopted these same principles in 2020, I believe. So we're going to continue it on, but certainly share that with the consultant.
Okay, and then before you is just a tentative process schedule that we've put together. Let's see, the staff will be publishing the RFP this week with an anticipated contract award at the second meeting in February. The actual study, our community meetings, as well as any board meeting updates should go between spring and summer. Then we're anticipating the cost of service study being adopted, as well as the Proposition 218 notices being issued in August. And then after the appropriate amount of time, we will conduct a public rate hearing on or after October 2nd, with final anticipation dates of having our operating budget workshop in October, and then our budget adoption in November.
Jamie, for the RFP for the consultant, if I had seen that word published and just thought, oh, we've already published it, was going to ask for a copy. But so when you do publish it, can you share it with the board?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next slide.
Pat, do you have a question? No?
Yeah, a couple of comments on the presentation and observations. First of all, by our past actions, the board have already solidified many of the inputs that go into the cost of service study. We approved the budget, which is a big chunk. We approved the capital improvement plan, which is another big chunk. And so the consultant really just needs to take all our costs, we said, and divide it by our number of customers. So we don't want to spend a lot of money on it. A simple division. No, I'm being facetious, but what my point is, we've already established the baselines. Now we're going to get somebody to look at primarily the cost allocations. And that's always a tough issue in accounting, is how do we allocate things that are not direct cost, like the general manager's position and staff? How do we allocate that among our various service areas? And so that's always an issue, I think, and it has been since accounting started. And we just need to take, like you said, simple and rational ways that we can explain, here's how we allocated those costs. Because there's a million different acceptable ways to do it within the accounting standards. It's just, how do we choose to do it? So that's important. We've already culled a lot of money out of the budget. $21 million, I think, that we've deferred in capital improvement, as you pointed out on your slide. So we've kind of already squeezed the turnip pretty good. I don't know how we're going to be able to do any more reductions. So just file that one away. The board and staff have already tried to really skinny down our expenditures at the risk of having increased costs in the future. Two examples are, of course, the tank coating, pushing it beyond the expected life, and then subjecting ourselves to some kind of emergency repair. And the same thing's true with the water line replacement. As we scale that back, now we're going to have more unexpected water line breaks that cost more to fix. So, it's a complicated process, but there's a lot of moving parts. And we just need to kind of continue to be good fiduciaries of our responsibility. And then finally, the timing of the debt. I think it was a good move to split that $100 million into two parts. The timing is kind of subject to market conditions. In the last debt issuance that we did, we were either very, very clever or very, very lucky, maybe a little of both. And if we could time that debt, that's not locked in stone. So we need to look at when is it advantageous to us to issue that debt when the rates are as low as we can possibly forecast. End of comment.
Thank you.
Director Osborne and then Director Enzini.
I would just suggest that during this process, that our public relations guy, staff, and on Nextdoor and other places, explain to the public the tremendous increase in a lot of our processes from the inflation, chemicals, fuel, pipe, labor, all of these things have just dramatically changed the dynamics of what we're doing, and what we were considering 2% inflation rate. Now we're, in some cases, pipe. I mean, I go down to buy a piece of PVC pipe, I'm absolutely amazed at what the cost of pipe is. So I think we need to start educating the public that this inflation rate is not just 8%, it's a whole lot different in particular subject matter, okay?
Thank you.
Director Osborne, Director Enzini, and then Director
Yeah,
Day.
and not to duplicate what was being said, I think the principles here are perfectly with the guided issues, but having outside eyes, I think, is really, really important. It takes away the skepticism of our ratepayers thinking, that we're making those decisions, when having new eyes look at something also gives us an opportunity to tweak something that was there right along that we didn't see. And I think it's really important, as Director Dwyer said, that the information, the education of our ratepayers is really, really important. But it's like, if you want to compare the price of eggs today and the eggs that you bought 8 months ago, yeah, the price of inflation is also included in those eggs and those chickens that died off, where we have a supply and demand problem. So the supply and demand problem is why greed is really hit from contractual obligations. So people understand that. We just have to simplify the words for them. And I really appreciate this breakdown, but it is going to get convoluted when ratepayers start talking to us.
Director Day.
Yeah, I was wondering if Jamie or Jim could just expand a little bit on what we're looking for in the as far as the consultant, the parameters of what we want them to do versus what we'll do in-house. Do you have ballpark cost estimate, what we think it might be, that sort of stuff?
If you go back to the slide, the chart. And I don't have a ballpark cost yet. We'll find out in the next month.
Right.
But I think Director Anzini's comments about getting a fresh set of eyes on this is appropriate. I mean, we've updated an old study once and actually twice with Mark doing it in 2020. Having a fresh set of eyes in 2023, I think is going to be beneficial. Hopefully, maybe include some suggestions on simplification of the rates. But I'll show it up there. The chart, like the third or fourth slide.
Oh, the flow chart?
Yeah, right there. Under input, that's almost all staff. The revenue requirements, I believe that's all staff. However, they'll take that and put in and determine what the net revenue requirements will be. And once those net revenue requirements will be, they'll use their, history and background to do the functionalization of the costs based on peaking factors and meter sizes that we, hadn't used in the past. So that's a lot of their efforts, item 3 and 4. And then we'll bring back the proposed rates for the board's approval.
So that the consultant would be more in stages 3 and 4, probably.
Yes, but they will also come up with the net revenue requirements after considering the revenues, the direct expenses, the overhead, and non-rate revenue that we have from like property taxes and things. Then they'll come up with the net revenue requirements that need to be divided out through all the costs to our ratepayers. I didn't mean to steal your thunder, Jamie, but this has kind of been etched in my mind over the last 20 years.
I appreciate it.
Director Anzini?
Yeah, one other thing that we haven't really paid attention, or we have paid attention to, but we haven't made that difference or that buffer on where we've had a lot of major environmental issues in the last 3 years because of the water coming in, the pipes busting, and of course the Caldor fire. And a lot of these issues we're now, I don't believe, but we do have an emergency fund. But recently, I mean, we just suffered another $500,000 worth of emergency funding for staffing to deal with our emergencies over that weekend. So, we have to kind of buffer that in there to be prepared, so we're not caught holding a debt from not planning on these emergencies. Emergencies are getting more and more now, so.
Great point. On an operating side of the budget, I think in my budget is a $500,000 emergency fund that we could tap if ops can't cover that. And also, if you look, having $60 to $80 million of capital reserves will give us a huge buffer as well. Right now, that's dwindling, so your point's well taken, and once we get that back up, we'll be in a good position for those type of capital emergencies.
Yeah, I think everybody's spot on. Obviously, with the way the economy's at least looking to start to present itself, we've got to be very careful. And it would be very easy with Director Dwyer's assertion of facetiousness that you just take your costs and divide it by your people, and but so many things are impacting our people out there that we got to be very careful and trying to determine the best way to do this and without the least impact to our ratepayers also. So, very good discussion. Jamie, more? Or were you just about done?
Nope, that was just about it.
It was informational item. I think there's very good dialogue. Do we have any further comments from the board? Any public in the audience? How about online? Jen?
If you'd like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions, page 2 of today's agenda. This is for any public comment on information item number 11, review of the cost of service analysis process. President Veerkamp, it does not appear there are any members wishing to speak.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank
Very
you.
good presentation. We are on to item 12, operations. I believe Dan's going to give the little update. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink.
We used to call these drought updates, but not quite a flood update, but it's somewhere approaching that status.
Well, if I may, Dan,
Yes,
first
please.
of all, I want to compliment the Corcoran Day acorn forecast. I mean, pretty good. Knock on wood, we still got a ways to go, but
Where's the jar?
I know.
The jar got a little musty in my office, so it became compost. So.
Hey, there's something to it.
Right. I think our title slide today really sums up what's occurred over the past 30 days. Underneath this wall of water is the Kybers Diversion Dam. including on your picture, right, river left is the diversion gates, and then our pipe is actually below our diversion dams. So that was taken by Brian Cooper on that morning of about almost 10,000 CFS. So pretty, there's no propane tanks in that picture, but as you can imagine, there was quite a bit of material and water coming down the South Fork American River. Next slide, please.
Dan, during this event and leading up to the event, those gates are all closed for our flume repair, right?
That is correct. Can you actually go back up one slide, Jim? That is correct, that obviously our canal, our annual maintenance, but unfortunately, as you can see on the left, the water was so high it's going over and into the canal anyways. And so that's why the spillways are so critical, allow us to evacuate all that stormwater storage while crews continue to perform the annual maintenance
The
process.
spillway at Flume 40, what,
There's about a dozen primary spillways. They used to be every mile. There are various locations that many of those can be actually operated remotely versus SCADA telemetry.
Okay.
So this time of year, we keep those open for the purpose of stormwater, debris, things that we don't want to bring into El Dorado 4 Bay and create a maintenance headache down the road. So,
thank you.
next slide, please. Okay, quick summary of the issue. Obviously, we have a significant shift, I think is perhaps an understatement in the water supply picture. Fortunately, we've gained quite a bit, almost 16,000 acre-feet of storage in Jacobson Lake, which is now spilled. Camp Creek Tunnel remains closed because frankly, we have more water than we need. And local inflows continue to cause the reservoir to spill. Obviously, very low demand, very nice saturated watershed above us. Fortunately, a lot of that with the low snow is snow, and obviously we got a lot of rain in those storms, but now we've got a nice snowpack all the way down to Pollock Pines. All of our reservoirs remain in flood control operation, and we've really pivoted from water quantity to water quality. And as Director Anzini had mentioned, we did have that call for requests from our conservation for our customers to avoid the need for any boil water or any other requests. Fortunately, that was heeded, and within a matter of, I believe, less than 2 days, we were back on track. It just showed we just need to move that slug through the system, and our customers really responded, and we appreciate that. I think well-positioned. Obviously, we're very well-positioned to meet our customer demands for this year as well as next at this point. We're anticipating to remain full for a period of time at Jacobson Lake. There's still between 200 and 300 cubic feet per second going down the Camp Creek Tunnel today. Wow. That shows even absent the big flows that we saw in the news, the Casumas River down in Michigan Bar and Wilton, that watershed is still very, very, very wet. Now within its flood control banks, but it'll be some time probably before we even need to reopen that tunnel. And our local conditions don't need to request continued conservation, but nevertheless remain under a statewide mandate. And trying to thread that line and those talking points is something that I know Jesse will once again help us out in reaching out to our customers to explain that position. Next slide, please.
And good luck.
Okay. I normally breeze through this slide. I want to take just maybe one more second and give some context because these two slides back to back might cause a little bit of confusion. Well, if your reservoirs aren't full, then why are we where we are? We're fortunate to be both a snow and rain-driven watershed, and our reservoirs have seasonal restrictions. And so both at Caples, at Silver Lake, at Echo Lake, and Weber Reservoir all have seasonal flash flow restrictions. So I can assure you that we are storing all the water we possibly can. We're in the process of just following that watershed response, and then when we can put in the spill boards later this spring, we will do so, and all these reservoirs undoubtedly will fill at this point. Next slide, please. I don't think we really need to rehash too much other than I think the 4:10 in the morning timeline. Obviously, Jacobson Lake is a local, for many reasons, is a local landmark, and there was a lot of attention. Carl assured me that there was a lot of folks out there watching our website and very anxious to go out there and see the spillway. So we're very happy to be able to relay that information to our customers. I know via social media they have let everybody know that, yes, the reservoir is spilling and will continue to spill for some period of time. And Patrick will likely talk to you in his presentation later today about the filters at Reservoir A, and so I'm not going to dive into too much detail now, but obviously some very challenging water quality conditions, as Director Enzini described, and hopefully through some of the investments that we make today, we can address that challenge. Next slide. Okay. We were expecting an inflection in our curve, not quite that inflection. And as you know, that was December 31, and we've since spilled on the 12th. So obviously that line now will, in next month's or the next presentation we give, we are at spilling, and we'll be at that probably for at least several months, hopefully into May. I mean, that's really the goal, is to keep us spilling into May. It's always nice to go into Memorial Day weekend with a full reservoir or close to it, and we're definitely on track to do that. Next slide, please. We included an additional year. This is a Folsom Reservoir for those members of the public. The light blue polygon is a 50-year average. We included a new year in here, and that'd be 2017, just to really reemphasize the fact that Folsom has now shifted from drought management to flood management itself. And you could see those flood control releases in 2017, and the fact that Folsom Reservoir, I think, gained 23 feet in one day, almost 200,000 acre feet. And now we've done one yo. There's not another yo-yo yet, but hopefully it'll kind of maintain that 500,000 acre feet. Now with no additional storms on the horizon, they feel a little more comfortable based upon our discussion of holding a little bit higher and still hopefully filling later this year. That large release they did have to make is when we had that second series of storms that Tracy will talk to in his update. Next slide.
Dan, did you notice any, or, when they built the new spillway next to Folsom Dam,
Right.
and then redid their operation manual, was there anything appreciably noticeable as far as, did they hold on to more water than they would have, say, 10 years ago?
Yeah. It's really hard to tell because they're not only just looking at in terms of conditions that are happening now, but also in the upstream storage at SMUD and PWA reservoirs. Unfortunately, everybody was getting so much water, they felt the need to make that large release. It was up to 35,000 cubic feet per second. It was about 20 times that was down there just a few days earlier. So I would say it factored, but I think there was just so much rain that they couldn't have really have done anything different with that new facility this time around. So. I think just some notable statistics of coming into the new year at Sly Park, we're almost 200% of normal for rainfall this early in the year. And overall in the American River is about 150% of normal. So we're obviously, you'll see some snow pillow updates in our next update when we come to you, just to show you how far. But I think we've all seen it on the news. Obviously, there were plenty of snow. You see the walls of snow along the highway. There is definitely very robust snowpack this year. Yes, exactly. At this point in the game, irrespective of how the rest of the year turns out, we think we're sitting pretty good for the rest of the year, but we do anticipate getting to more normal conditions, whatever normal is at this point anymore, right? So, next slide. Okay, and this is where the tough part comes in, and that is explaining the fact that, yes, we still are under a state-mandated drought regulation, while at the same time today we're asking you to expend significant emergency and contingency funds, and we appreciate all your comments earlier today. So irrespective of our local supply conditions, that action that the board did take in June of last year, I guess June of 2 years ago now, we are still complying with that state mandate. We are still asking for that voluntary conservation, but our supply conditions remain robust. So next slide. And excuse me, May of last year, I was off. I apologize. And then just to kind of look, as we're closing up here, just of how we're doing for the year. So overall, last year, we were about 9% less than 2021 and 5% less than 2020. But it's important to take an annual and think of where we were in March. Obviously, we were very high, or excuse me, by April of last year, very high spring demands. And as you recall from our, next slide, please, our curve, we had a significant shift in demand over that once we got out of spring. We made that call to our customers. You can see starting, red line was last year. some of the highest demands that we saw in the first quarter, and then really turned on the conservation curve going into the summer when it matters most. Next slide. And then our famous outreach efforts continue. Obviously, focus on indoor use and water efficiency that we can do this year. And then we also talked about our conservation call outs. So obviously we are reaching our customers, which is a great thing, and we're seeing a very quick response when we do reach out and request their assistance. That should be it. This is obviously the way we like to see Camp Creek Tunnel and Park Creek, nice clean water coming into the reservoir.
Director Osborne.
A statement and then a question. On the unofficial great gauge at the back of 3,000 feet, we have 37.5 inches. Now, that is a guesstimate because my rain gauge holds 6 inches, and when it overflowed while I was bobbing around in the Sea of Cortez, you know, but I used my neighbor's, and his overflowed, so we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 95% of our annual rainfall at the end of the last storm. The other thing is, on our refill issues with the Bureau, how do we come out of that?
Thank you. Great question. So, and that's related to the 2020 and 2022 water transfers, our refill obligations. I'm happy to report, and I should have included a slide. Thank you. I overlooked that. We have fulfilled both of our refill obligations for both Jacobson Lake and Weber Reservoir. So we closed the loop officially on Weber Reservoir because it had spilled prior to the end of December, and we will do that at the end of January, submit our report at the end of this month. When it was spilling, obviously, everybody was spilling, frankly, at that point. So based upon our communication with DWR and Reclamation so far, we feel comfortable we have eliminated both of those refill obligations.
I suspect that the price of water to sell will be dramatically less than this year than.
That is true, but it's important for the public as a whole to understand again, American River, Folsom Reservoir, remember we almost filled last year. The California water supply conditions are really a statewide. So we really have to look at statewide Central Valley Project, State Water Project. The north of the state and Shasta still remains, unfortunately, very low. And that affects the Central Valley Project allocations, which then, my point in saying that is we're definitely not eliminating the potential for additional agencies needing water this year. Very early obviously in the year, being still in January, but they do need significant storms to the north to really boost what will be the federal. Obviously, Oroville, State Water Project, Lake Oroville, DWR, doing much better, but the north of the state is still in a challenging water supply situation.
How full is Sites?
Same as last year.
Yeah.
I think it's spilling.
I don't know anything that's not spilling after the last.
Any further questions of Dan? Great update, Dan. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak? Seeing none. Anybody online wishing to speak?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Veerkamp does not appear. Anyone is wishing to speak on information item number 12.
Okay, thank you, Jen. We are on to action items. Action item 13, finance. I will be recusing myself from the vote on this item.
I'll move approval.
I'll second. And so I'll take over, since you're recusing from this. Do we have any board comment?
Who won?
Okay.
We already did that.
Sorry.
Oh, did that?
Yeah, you're
What?
Pat?
My only comment is, I looked through the warrant register and usually look for big numbers of who we paid and how much we paid, and there's a couple that pop out. One is the payment for solar electric service, almost $60,000. And then the next number down is payment to PG&E under wastewater. My question is, is the solar investment paying off? And maybe that's for a future meeting, that's seeing an analysis of how our investment in solar is doing.
My December was bad at home.
Initials are PG&E.
Good morning, Brian Mueller, Director of Engineering. It's a great question. We do have a tentative item scheduled, I think in March or April, to just go over all of our renewable energy, small hydro type of projects and just a report of how they're doing and the
Great,
payback
thank you
we're
very
receiving.
much.
Sure.
Is there any public comment on item 13?
Members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda. Vice President Day, it does not appear anyone is wishing to speak on action item number 13. Option 1, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Day. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Director Day. Item 14, operations. Mr. Crane. Good morning.
Morning.
Tracy.
Good morning, President Veerkamp, members of the board, Tracy Crane, wastewater recycle water manager. I'm here today to request consideration of an emergency declaration and ask for ratification of emergency contracts issued as a result of recent storm activity. Next slide, please. So extreme rain across the region, talked about a little bit today, but caused significant challenges for our operation. Challenges for drinking water treatment due to high turbidity, multiple sanitary sewer overflows, the mother lode sanitary sewer force main to break, and overflow conditions at Deer Creek, El Dorado Hills treatment plant, and hauling of wastewater from multiple locations, which I'll discuss further in the presentation. Next slide, please. So where do we haul it, Vice President Day? Several different places, actually, because both of the collection systems were pretty inundated at the time, so we had to take some and put it down in the El Dorado Hills system, and some from Camino stayed in the Deer Creek system. So here's some storm data, unprecedented category 4 atmospheric river event. According to the Placerville Weather Station gauge from the Department of Water Resources, we got 10.03 inches in that 48-hour period of New Year's, I think it's 30/31. And that, so that, according to our hydraulic modeler, that's a 200-year, 2-day storm. Then we got an additional 12 inches over the first 16 days, so it just seemed like it kept raining, including 5 inches over the Martin Luther King recent weekend. So the nearly 2 feet of precipitation, that equates to about 14 gallons of water for every square foot of our service area, just to give it some perspective. Next slide, please. So the impacts, widespread flooding throughout our service area, a break in the mother lode force main. For those listening who may not know, the mother lode force main is a downstream sewer pipeline and downstream gravity pipeline. It's a 9-mile conveyance system that services the district's eastern customers. The original pipeline was constructed in '79 and it's near the useful life. To date, about 4 miles has been replaced, and another project will be coming up shortly to replace another 3.3. So we had 9 sanitary sewer overflows. I believe we had 8 of them concurrently. So, Deer Creek and El Dorado Hills experienced flows beyond their hydraulic capacity. Slate Creek overflowed into the El Dorado Hills lift station storage ponds, And we exhausted the storage capacities of our El Dorado Hills, Deer Creek, and Camino Heights treatment plant, as well as the El Dorado lift station. Next slide. So severe flooding at the El Dorado lift station area. So the picture on the left there is a picture of the post office on Pleasant Valley Road. On the right, you're looking at the entrance to the El Dorado lift station facility, and the water that's going across the road there, that's actually a bridge where Slate Creek is supposed to go under the bridge there. Next slide, please. So these are pictures from 2 of the 9 sanitary sewer overflows. So essentially, stormwater just inundated the collection system and filled everything up. And so we had many of them, like I said, I think 8 of them were going concurrently that day. The wastewater treatment plants, the picture on the left is the downstream sample site at the Deer Creek wastewater treatment plant. On the right is the downstream sample site at the El Dorado Hills treatment plant. As you can see, both of them are submerged underwater. Both plants had influent flows in excess of 20 million gallons. And for perspective, Deer Creek has a dry weather design flow of about 3.6, and El Dorado Hills is about 4.0. So more than 500% of the plant's capacity. So with that high of flow, the emergency storage in the facilities was exhausted relatively quickly. Should say every effort was made to treat as much of the incoming flow as possible. Next slide, please. At the El Dorado Hills facility also, all of the stormwater and some of the drains in the plant are directed to a series of 2 concrete lined storage ponds. The floodwater overwhelmed the pumping capacity of the ponds, and we had to bring in some additional temporary pumps to keep that, have ability to control that level. Next slide, please. So the mother lode force main break, it happened overnight, about 3:45 a.m. It had been pumping pretty consistently. The break occurred adjacent to the 2 that we had, just upstream from the 2 that we had in October 2021. And as a result of those breaks in 2021, we had reduced the pumping capacity to lower the pressure in that force main at that time. And we were operating at that reduced pumping capacity when it broke. So we contacted Doug Veerkamp General Engineering. They mobilized and completed the repair, and the pipeline was back into service that evening. But since the pipeline was already operating at the reduced capacity, that capacity was reduced even further to maintain the pumping capacity that we did have in the station so that we could move as much water as we could through that conveyance. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the operational response. Our sanitary sewer management plan, our overflow response plan, and all of the permits that these facilities operate all have similar language of a duty to mitigate that says that we have to take appropriate action to secure the area, remove the cause of the overflow, clean up, and all of it's to minimize health hazards to the public and protect the environment. I want to say district staff rose to the occasion. They acted safely and professionally. Many of us work in a lot of hours with 0 accidents or injuries. In fact, we've gone over 550 days without a lost time injury.
Awesome. That's amazing.
So El Dorado Hills lift station hauling operation, as I said, Slate Creek overflowed its banks and inundated the storage ponds at the lift station. Once the creek flow receded, then hauling operations had to begin. Flows to that lift station exceeded the reduced pumping capacity for the next several days, and by our calculations, it was almost 1 million gallons a day more than we could pump through the conveyance. So once again, Doug Veerkamp General Engineering was utilized to help haul. They used 7 to 10 trucks, and they hauled approximately 700,000 gallons a day, while district staff hauled about 100,000 gallons a day out of there. Hauling began on January 2nd and continued through the 12th, when it appeared we'd have a break in the weather. Unfortunately, we'd receive another 5 inches the coming weekend, and it had to resume again on Saturday the 14th and continue through the 17th. As I stand here today, we've made some good ground. There's still about 850,000 gallons, but we're able to pump more with our pumps than it's coming in, so we're slowly lowering that pond down. Next slide, please. So there's a picture of the creek coming over the bank Obviously hauling, we had to wait for the flow to subside. I should add too, that after that happened, we came in and added some additional berm on top of that and cut a little swale below it to prevent that from happening in the first place, or happening again. On the other side is pictures of both Veer camps and our staff's operation hauling out of that lift station. Slightly better news at Camino. The storm event exhausted the facility's storage capacity and contractor hauling was necessary, but overflows were avoided. This is a land application plant, so the only way to move water through the plant is to actually spray it on the fields, and by permit, we're prevented from using those land application areas if the soil's saturated. So essentially, the only way to get water out of the plant was to move it out with trucks. Again, hauling began on January 2nd. This time we used Sierra Site Services and Sweet Septic and some district staff, although we only had 2 tanker trucks and they were kind of split between the 2 areas. We stopped it on the 12th, but unfortunately, again, the 5 more inches of rain. We had to start hauling again on the 18th and 19th, and as I stand here today, we think that we've made enough ground we've just used district staff over the weekend. We've made enough ground that we can get to where the ground will dry out enough that we can begin moving water through that plant. Next slide. So there's just a picture of the storage pond. That little, the left side is both a district truck and a contractor truck. And on the right side, that little caged area there, that's the pond they're hauling out of, and that's the overflow that goes to the next pond. So you can see they were making some progress in that pond. Next slide. So this is the slide that contains all the regulatory information about the emergency declaration, excuse me. And as you're aware, Governor Newsom declared state of emergency, and we're requesting that you consider doing the same in this case. Next, yeah, environmental review. So upon adoption, should the board declare the emergency, staff will file the notice of exemption with CEQA with the county recorder's office. A little bit of the timeline of events. So December 30th, the storm started. We had multiple high-level alarms in lift stations. Nothing had overflowed yet. We had to go out and respond that night. On the 31st, it just continued. The mother lode fourth main break happened. Creek overflowed into the pond. That was the big day where just everything got inundated. We had to bring in the emergency pumps. Excuse me, 2nd through the 12th, continued response daily and sometimes around the clock to trying to keep the water from overflowing. And then we thought we really had a handle on it, but lo and behold, the following weekend, another 5 inches came, so we had to do some more hauling. A little bit of the costs on the bottom there. I should note that the Camino Heights hauling, we spent about $4,800 more than what that number says because this agenda item was published before we finished hauling. Next slide, please. So here's the emergency expenses. A lot of money. And as I said, we spent about $4,800 more than that. We are seeking recovery of the expenses in coordination with Cal OES. Right now, we're not sure with the emergency declaration if there's federal or state funds, but we're working with County OES, and we will pursue, trying to recover these costs. So, will you please?
Option 1, declare an emergency under applicable provisions of the Public Contract Code and Public Resources Code. Ratify the general manager's award of a construction contract to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering in the not to exceed amount of $35,000 for the emergency repair of the mother lode force main. Ratify the general manager's awards of wastewater pumping and hauling contracts to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering, Inc. and Sierra Site Services in the not to exceed amounts of $540,000 and $120,600 respectively, and delegate, authorize, and direct the district general manager to take all further actions necessary to respond to the emergency declared herein. Option 2 would be take other action as directed by the board. Option 3, take no action. And staff is recommending that we have approval of option 1.
I'm going to move option 2, and I'll make a reason why. I would think it would be appropriate for this board to petition the state because of our exemplary past practices of SSOs. This was way beyond our capability of controlling it, and I'm afraid that the state might come in with a violation. Hopefully, I've talked to Jim about this, but I think if the board took action to petition the state that it was way beyond our capability to alleviate the problem, that maybe we would be exempt from the SSOs.
Could I comment? First, Director Osborne, I heard you make a motion. It hasn't been seconded, and I would just like to comment first on that. The State Water Board has no statutory authority to exempt us from the requirements of the Clean Water Act. They do have enforcement, some discretion in their enforcement authority, and we have experienced circumstances in the past when the regional water quality control boards have exercised that discretion in not bringing enforcement actions against us and agencies like us during circumstances like this. As I think you all know, the storms that we experienced ultimately resulted in a declaration of emergency by the governor. So we would expect the Regional Water Board to exercise some discretion in not bringing enforcement action against the district for the violations or potential violations that you heard about. But there is no guarantee of that. So we, Tracy and his staff have been working very hard to provide all of the notices required that we are required to submit to the Regional Water Quality Control Boards, and I've been working with them to review those to ensure that we're being fully transparent, we're being forthcoming, we're providing all of the information necessary. But you know, we have to protect the district as well and the district's ratepayers, which we will do. Ultimately, if the Regional Water Board does initiate enforcement, then we will comply and we'll cooperate with the agencies. But at this point in time, I don't expect for there to be any significant enforcement action against the district.
Do you see any value in the board taking a declaration?
I think, Director Osborne, that the declaration of emergency, the action that staff is requesting that the district take today is exactly what the board can do at this point in time to mitigate its exposure, and that is declare an emergency based on the circumstances that have been presented to you, and ratify the actions as presented.
I withdraw my suggestion and vote, move option 1.
I'll second.
I've got something I better say. I support, obviously, the declaration of the emergency. I really appreciate staff keeping me in the loop and at every step of the way, even when Jim was gone for a few days, Jose did a great job in communicating with myself. I do intend to recuse myself, though, on the vote for Doug Veerkamp on ratifying the contracts awarded by General Manager, as I've done since I started on this board. I certainly do not have any financial interest or receive any benefit from Doug, but being my brother, obviously, I think there's an appearance of potential conflict. Just doesn't look good. So at this point, I'd like to see us I will make a motion to bifurcate the vote on item 14 so I can vote on the declaration of emergency and then stay away from the ratification of the contract. So before we get to the motion that's on the floor, I would like to propose another motion that we bifurcate the vote on this item into 2.
I'll second that motion. So first, we would need to, well, you can
Vote on
still
that.
leave this. No, I'm taking control. I'm just kidding.
Jen can take it.
So for the record, the motion on the table is we are going to bifurcate the vote on agenda item action item number 14 that you just heard Tracy present into two actions. Declaration of emergency, which President Veerkamp will be participating in that vote, and ratification of the contracts separately. So what we would need is to vote on whether or not you all agree that we bifurcate the vote. Then we'll need a first and a second if you agree on the emergency declaration, and then a first and second on the ratification of the contract.
Just one point of clarification. A motion to separate or bifurcate is incidental to a main motion and can only be made when a main motion contains items that can be voted on separately. So a motion has been made to authorize option 1, and that's been seconded. Since the motion, the incidental motion to separate has been made and seconded, the board clerk is correct that the board would first vote on whether to separate, and if that's successful, then it would return to the main motion, which has already been made for option 1 on the declaration, and then subsequently the ratifications. So there would be no need for a motion and a second for each of those two actions. It's already been made by Director Osborne and Director Dwyer, I believe.
I just want to be clear, because the motion was to move option 1, which includes both. So how is Director Veerkamp, we're going to vote to bifurcate it, but then how is Director Veerkamp going to be able to vote on just the emergency separate the contracts?
Yeah, think of the motion to separate as procedural only. So the motion on the table, the main motion, which is on the table, is option 1. But there's a procedural step to separate those first, so that President Veerkamp can vote on one but not the other.
Well, no, he would, I'm agreeing with Jennifer. I think to separate, he's voting on that, we all vote on that. But then we go back to option 1, he's still not getting to vote on the emergency declaration because he would still recuse himself because of the family ties.
Not on the declaration. There is no family tie to the declaration.
So we'd have 2 votes.
So you'd have 2 votes, one on
Okay.
the declaration and then one on the ratification of contracts.
Okay.
That's as clear as the water that went down the storm drain.
But we will need a first, okay, let's just move through it because
Yeah.
you're saying that we're going to vote to bifurcate, we'll do that
Let's
now.
do that.
Then you're saying we're going to move back to option 1, but technically we can't do that because Director Veerkamp cannot vote on option 1.
What if he leaves the room?
No, that's not the
Do
question.
that, that's just on the vote.
There's a variety of ways that you could do this.
Okay, so can I?
What I'm suggesting is how a motion which is an incidental motion under Robert's rules is taken up by the legislative body. So it must come after a main motion has been made, which we have. I mean, we could do it different ways, but let's first proceed to the vote, to the board's vote on whether or not to separate the vote.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to, I got it from this piece.
Yeah.
All right, any input from the room? Any input online? Hopefully not.
Any public comment for the motion to bifurcate the emergency declaration and the contracts? President Veerkamp, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak. We're ready for the vote.
Please vote on the bifurcation.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye.
Thanks, Lori.
Then can we just make 2 more incidental motions of the declaration and the, I'm not sure
Or
how.
would we do motion 1,
Now that
part A, and then part B?
Yeah, essentially, what you have now is you have an option 1 that must be taken up in 2 separate votes, one for the declaration and one for the ratification of the contracts.
I understand, I missed that part, I apologize. Okay, so we already have a first and a second. Option 1, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Dwyer. We will take up the vote on the emergency declaration only. So we will be declaring emergency under applicable provisions of the Public Contract Code and Public Resources Code. That's what we're doing in this vote.
Okay, any other comment? No. Anybody from the room? Anybody online?
Any members of the public wishing to speak on the emergency declaration of action item number 14? President Veerkamp, it does not appear so. I believe we're ready for the vote.
On the declaration only.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Now we will be moving to the second part of option 1, where Director Day will take over with Director Veerkamp recusing himself. The second part of the option 1, we will ratify the general managers of contracts to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering in the not to exceed amount of $35,000 for the emergency repair of the Motherlode Force Main, to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering and Sierra Site Services in the not to exceed amounts of $540,000 and $120,600 respectively for the wastewater pumping and hauling contracts. And delegate, authorize, and direct the general manager to take all further actions necessary to the emergency described herein.
All right, is there any other further board comment?
Yes, Director Day, I think, just to be clear, these contracts have already been let by the authority of the general manager, and we're just ratifying, as it says in the motion, it says, yeah, he did the right thing.
Correct. Is there any public comment in-house or online on this?
Vice President Day, it does not appear there are any members wishing to speak on the ratification of the contract awards for the emergency. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Vice President, thank you very much.
Thank
Vice
you for the
President
good
Day, While you're
direction.
hot, keep going, please. I need at least a minute on that one.
All right, item 15. Ms. DeLongchamp? I'm going to try to pronounce it correct.
That sounded pretty good.
Okay.
I don't think I pronounced it correct either, so.
He's trying to be French.
Hey, yeah, we.
Oui.
It's Kaylee.
Yeah.
No, I believe my mother said it's Kaylee. That's it. Not Kylie, not anything else.
No, I live in France, I know.
Okay, you guys.
Doing better than me then. All right, my name is Kaylee DeLongchamp. I am an associate engineer here at the district, and I'm here to talk about the Bass Lake Tank number 1 and number 2 recoding project. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't talk very loud, and I will work on that. So back in 2018, the board awarded a contract to Cal Sierra Construction to perform the recoding of the interior tanks of Tank 1 and Tank 2 above the high water mark. However, then later that year, we actually came back to the board for an amendment because we found that the interior coating in tank number 1 was actually in a failing condition. So we changed from doing work in both tanks to doing only work in tank number 1 and doing a full recoating of the interior. Then later last year, we came to the board with our operation budget and financial plan and asked for funding to include Bass Lake Tank's recoating project in 2023. So a summary of the issue, the district has 37 drinking water tanks and reservoirs throughout the system. 20 of them are welded steel drinking water tanks, And the industry standard recommends that welded steel tanks be recoated at regular intervals about 15 years. As a note of information, the district staff will plan to further describe our tank recoating plan at the next board meeting, the February 13th board meeting, so look forward to that.
Can't wait.
A little bit of rust is the iron in our water, right?
So the Bass Lake tanks were constructed in 2005. They're each 4.1 million gallons. And as stated before, back in 2018, 2019, we did recoat the inside of tank number 1. So Bass Lake tanks actually represent a major transmission hub in delivering water from our eastern supplies to our Cameron Park and El Dorado Hills customers. I just want to note on this slide, as you can see, there were some houses being built when this was first taken, this photo. Those houses now exist. We will be reaching out to the surrounding properties and homeowners to make sure they know about the project and make sure they're aware of, if they have any questions or concerns, reach out to me.
That's my area.
We'll be reaching out to them.
There'll be no comments.
So scope of work, on tank number 1, we're gonna add a staircase and guardrail, and this photo up at the top shows the guardrail on tank number 2 that was just completed last year. And then the tank on the bottom right shows the staircase on tank number 2, which was also, again, completed last year. So we're gonna add a staircase and guardrail to tank number 1, Bass Lake tank. We're gonna then touch up the interior coating following the welding of putting those items onto the tank, and then recoat the exterior in full. Then on tank number 2, we're again gonna add the staircase and guardrail, recoat the interior in full, recoat the exterior in full. I just wanna make special note of the 2 photos on the left, the bottom left. These are from tank number 2, tank 2 at Reservoir 2. However, they are important for this Bass Lake tank project because they're showing the wedging of the rafters. And on tank number 1, Bass Lake tank number 1, we actually found on the top flange of the rafters, the original primer coating. So that was part of why the coating was found to be in failure on Bass Lake tank number 1. So we'll, I'm sure, see that on Bass Lake tank number 2.
I got a question. Like the tour you gave us of the tanks in Camino, I think, there was a lot of structural damage there. Do you anticipate any structural issues with these 2?
We had no structural issues with Bass Lake tank number 1, so we don't foresee any with Bass Lake tank number 2.
Good answer.
Next slide. So we released a request for qualifications in early 2022. We had 8 contractors submit, 3 contractors were pre-qualified. We then released a request for bids in December of last year and had the bid opening earlier this month. All 3 contractors that were pre-qualified bid on the project. Next slide. So this is a summarization of the 3 bids we received. The bid from Cal Sierra Construction, which is the contractor that performed the work on Bass Lake tank number 1 back in 2018, was found to be the lowest responsible and responsive bidder for this project. Next slide.
Ohio,
Yeah, I know. Were they going to bring the whole team out?
the moving costs, yeah.
We then also released a specialty coating inspection request for proposals December of last year, and we received 4 proposals. Proper surface preparation and application of the coating of the surfaces is critical to the success of the adhesion and longevity of the coating system, so it was important for us to have specialty coating inspection that had the experience and knowledge to ensure we get the best product for the district. Next slide. So we received 4 proposals. The district recommends award to MCS Inspection due to their relevant experience, qualified inspectors, and their lowest proposed cost.
It's actually good to see bids coming in that are all, other than one, fairly close to each other. I think maybe the market is stabilizing a little bit instead of people just throwing the big number and figuring they'll get some.
Yeah. So environmental review. Environmental staff reviewed the project activities and determined that it qualified for Class 1 categorical exemption from CEQA. A notice of exemption will be filed once the project is approved by the board. Funding requirements. So we need the construction contract from Cal Sierra. We need specialty inspection contract with MCS, which comes to a total of $3,103,331. The 2023-2024 operations budget that was brought to the board previously included $2,610,420 in 2023 for this project. So this is over that amount by several hundred thousand. But the staff will continue to evaluate overall 2023 budget expenditures with the goal of not exceeding the total water operations budget. And as a reminder, the operations budget expenditures are reviewed by the board on a quarterly basis. Board options, option 1, award contracts to Cal Sierra Construction Incorporated in the not-to-exceed amount of $2,961,800 for tank recoating and repair services, and MCS inspection in the not-to-exceed amount of $141,531 for specialty coating inspection for the Bass Lake Tanks Recoating Project, which staff has determined is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, tracking number T2021.22. Option 2, take other action as directed by the board. Option 3, take no action. We recommend option 1.
All right,
I'll
Director
move
Anzine?
option 1.
Okay, let's have a question, and then we have a,
Just don't get into discussion, but question for the
Right.
presentation first, okay?
Question. When and if this is approved, when it gets started, what is the end date of this?
We're looking at mid to late October of this year.
Sure, okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, Director Day.
I'll move option 1.
Okay.
Second.
All right.
I have a second. We have a motion and a second. Any further board comment?
Yeah, I do have a comment. It's about MCS inspection. Just a little concern that the CEO's nickname is Rusty.
This is called a point of humor.
Any comment from the room besides that one? You strike that from the record, please.
Control of your audience and the board.
Any public
That
comment?
was- Yes, that was good. Hey, no,
Hey,
go ahead.
I'm back in. Is there any public online comment? Jennifer? Rusty.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This is the time to comment on action item number 15, option 1, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Dwyer. President Veerkamp does not appear. Any members of the public online are wishing to speak?
All right, please vote on the item.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, very good. Item 16, engineering. Show me the money.
Okay, good morning. John Money, Senior Civil Engineer, here this morning to discuss a contract amendment for easement acquisition for the Sly Park Intertie Improvements Project. Yep. So previous board items, we were here actually just over a year ago to author for a grant authorization for $10 million for a DWR grant, followed by a contract award in February of last year to Waterworks Engineers for the design of the proposed project. And then most recently, we were here in last November for inclusion of this project in the 2023 to 2027 capital improvement plan. Overall summary of why we are here today. The design of the Sly Park Intertie has been underway. We are just about ready to wrap up the final basic design report. During that process, we have completed initial environmental reviews, but also our topographic surveys for the alignment, and also reviewed all of our existing easements, and we've had some discrepancies there. So we are seeking additional easement acquisition services to help perfect our access to the pipeline end to end. A little, again, background on the project, because it's been a while since we've been in front of the board. The Sly Park Intertie was originally constructed in 1978. It was designed to alleviate water shortages from the 1976 and 1977 drought, basically conveying water from Reservoir 1 to Sly Park. It consists of generally about 3.5 miles of steel pipe. The steel pipe was very substandard at the time, does not meet our current standards, but it provides that critical link between our two water treatment plants. Over time, the pipeline has had substantial leaks throughout and has basically failed, and it was taken out of service in 2013, or at least major portions of the pipeline have failed. Next slide. Review of our water system and where this lies. So we generally have two water sources, 184 water that comes into Reservoir 1 on the north side of Pollock Pines, and then our Jenkinson Link supplies that come through Reservoir A. Reservoir A feeds the system through the red line right there, the Pleasant Oak, Maine, and it also jumps over to the north side of our system through the yellow pipeline, which is a communal conduit. Reservoir 1 feeds directly downhill through the blue and the black lines. That's EDM 1 and EDM 2. So the Sly Park Intertie pipeline is the green line there at the very eastern side of our facility map. So that will directly connect those two water treatment plants. It also provides some redundancy in case we have any issues on the communal conduit, the yellow pipeline there connecting the two. Again, the SPI will also, the improvements we're proposing will allow for bidirectional flow, so we can process water both from Res A to Res 1 and from Res 1 back to Res A, which gives us a lot of operational flexibility at our water treatment plants and able to better combat some of the emergencies we've seen, such as drought and wildfires, and most recently, water quality issues. Again, Res A currently is not able to be taken fully offline, and that's so this will also allow us some extended outages at the plant so that we can finally get to some long overdue maintenance and repairs at that plant. And then again, it also provides us with long-term energy savings, because right now we gravity flow down the communal conduit to Reservoir 2 and then pump all the way back up to Reservoir 1. We will still have to pump uphill from Reservoir A to Reservoir 1, but it's less a little bit less energy intensive. So, next slide, please. Again, here's a schematic of the pipeline shown in red. Kind of the more impressive thing is to look at the profile there on the black kind of grid. That's the elevation profile of the pipeline as we go from both water treatment plants. So we've got some pretty significant swings in pressure as we cross those 2 or 3 canyons through the 2 plants.
Question.
Yeah.
When we, after it's constructed and when we activate it to experience the benefits of this flexibility, will it flow naturally downhill from Res 1 to Res A?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
but we have to pump it from Res A back up to Res 1?
Yeah, the ultimate design will have a new pump station constructed at Reservoir A to pump up, but there's no improvements up at Res 1 to convey flow down. It's just the pipeline.
Thank you.
Go ahead, next slide. So again, a summary of some of our topographic findings. We found we were pretty confident that we had easement throughout from end to end. Unfortunately, we found some deviations, or what indicates some deviations by matching up the topos with current aerial photography. We do have one missing easement. We do have a couple areas as shown here where we might have to slightly modify the pipeline alignment for current encroachments onto the pipeline. And then also, we are looking for construction easements, both for just the general accessibility during construction, but also for staging areas. So next slide will show that in a little bit more detail. So this image on the left is actually a 30-inch pipeline in the middle of Nevada that our design consultant put in, and it just gives you some idea of, you know, we're going for a 24-inch pipeline, so it is slightly smaller, but they basically took a 75-foot corridor. You know, if you can, that's what you're aiming for. We have 20-foot easements throughout, so that just makes either construction very constrained and slow and expensive, or we can look to expand that with construction easements and give us a little bit more flexibility as we move forward. On the right, those areas in blue are staging areas, or proposed staging areas. So again, we can't go, we can't realistically construct a pipeline, you know, end to end. We've got to have areas where we can collect the material and give the contractor staging yards throughout the pipeline. So we'll be negotiating those areas as well. Go ahead, next item. So total scope kind of consists in two different pots. The first one is easements, so we need 7 new undocumented easements. We're planning on modifying about 10 of the existing easements, and then we're asking for 13 construction easements along the alignment. The second pot is going along with that is the consultant will need to come in and appraise, do a full appraisal of 7 of those properties, waiver valuations, which is a less formal appraisal of 11 additional properties, and then diary valuations, which are just kind of de minimis evaluations on smaller properties. So we've got 2 of those. So initially, it's important to note that the initial proposal from Waterworks did include this service, but we opted to not award it at the time of the contract because we wanted to kind of vet out again a little bit. We wanted to get our topographic surveys back, kind of see what our needs were. So the original proposal was for 280. We've whittled that down slightly to about 260. So again, the action today would award an amendment to the Waterworks contract of $259,943 for the easement services. Again, the summary of kind of where we're at on the overall funding and schedule. We have been pretty fortunate today, so we've received a $750,000 grant to offset design costs, which would partially offset some of the costs of this additional amendment. More substantially, we've received that $10 million award for construction, which we won't touch or access until we actually go to construction phase of the contract. The remainder of the contract will be paid for by, again, the 2024 bond issuance we were discussing earlier. As far as schedule, we're currently on target to finish the design and environmental studies by the end of this year. So we're hoping to be out to bid about this time next year for the construction contract, with planned construction in 2024 and 2025. Just as a heads up to the board, we are also evaluating a couple additional design scope modifications. The first is design of a segment from the final segment on the north end of the Sled Park Intertie. So the initial proposal was just from Ridgeway South, which is the portion of pipeline that has completely failed. We didn't broach the crossing of Highway 50 because that could be many, many millions of dollars for a new casing and coordination with Caltrans. Our design consultant has come up with an alternative alignment, so we're evaluating that and seeing if we want to go ahead and add that last segment into the design. Also, the design of Sly Park Hills water line, which is essentially another portion of the Sly Park Hill, or the Sly Park intertie. That was previously approved on the CIP. We unfortunately just don't have the staff right now to move forward with that design, so we're hoping to award that design to Waterworks, and then award the construction contract and receive some efficiencies during construction there. Getting back to the pump station, there's substantial electrical improvements that are associated with that. One that was not included in the design memorandum was incorporation of new generators for that facility. And then also, we've had some battles with PG&E lately on, generally, they want to give you one service per parcel. And so it's going to be a kind of a dance back and forth with PG&E, whether or not we have two services existing on that parcel, and we can reuse reuse and relocate one of our services, or how that's going to kind of flush out. So there's going to be some additional costs with that for our consultant to flush that out. And the last is to evaluate a dechlorination system for our Clear Creek diversions, which we're contractually obligated to discharge flows. Right now, that's all just off the head of the Res 1 water treatment plant. But if we shut down Reservoir 1, we still need to supply those flows. So we're evaluating how we're gonna do that. So getting back to that, we'll have some internal discussions and really kind of vet the merit of those scope, and depending on our discussions, we'll be back to present to the board. Getting back to today, option 1 is to approve a contract amendment for Waterworks engineers in the not-to-exceed amount of $259,943 for easement acquisition services for the Sly Park Intertie Improvements Project, and authorize additional funding of that same amount, $259,943 for the Sly Park Intertie Improvements Project. Option 2, take other option as directed by the board, and option 3, take no option. Staff's recommendation is option 1.
Move on.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second with the comment. There's currently a significant grant request for the Camino, Rancho del Sol, and Sierra Springs Fire Safe Councils to pursue a CAL FIRE grant to do a fuel reduction right in that same area going from east to west. This cuts through those neighborhoods going north to south. It seems like it might be a natural tie-in to get both things kind of coordinated, because this would give access, and it would also do fuel reduction on that north to south corridor. So, and that's a very vulnerable area for the county. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, if you can provide that information, actually maybe send it to Jim, or if you can send it directly to me, that would be great coordination. We've actually had some homeowners that have voiced some hope that we would stage that a whole grant or a coordination with the fire. So if we can coordinate, that's on both fronts.
Great idea. All right, a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Anybody in the room? Jen, anybody online want to comment?
This is a time for any public comment on action item number 16, option 1, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Dwyer. President Veerkamp, it does not appear there are any members online wishing to speak.
All right,
Believe
please
we're ready.
vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, John. Okay, item 17, operations, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah.
It looked like it.
Now he needs a new knife.
I do have this pipe at home, too.
Don't worry, Director Dwyer, I still have my knife. Good morning, Patrick Wilson, Drinking Water Operations Manager, presenting the Reservoir A Water Treatment Plant Filter Media Replacement Project Construction Contract Award. So previous board action, this project was included in the 2023-2024 operating budget and the 2023-2027 financial plan. So summary of the issue, Reservoir A Water Treatment Plant is a dual media sand and anthracite, so 12 inches of sand on and then 12 inches on the bottom, 24 inches of sand, anthracite, excuse me, on top, anthracite coal. There's no solids removal ahead of the filters, better known as inline filtration. So unlike Reservoir 1 water treatment plant, where we actually have the large sedimentation basin that you can see from Gilmore Road, we really have nothing. So all the flock that we generate to remove all the particulates in the water sources, the only place that they can come out is on the interface of the media itself. So all that loading occurs on the filters. Subsequently, we've had high filter head loss, particularly in 4 filters that we're targeting today. Of note, the media age. So traditionally, filter media, just as a wherewithal, the average for most water agencies is a replacement around 20 years. It's really dependent upon not just the age of the media, but the condition of the media. So some of the media can be cleaned at 20 years, which we're looking at doing a Reservoir 1 water treatment plant in the next handful of years, as it's at that 20-year life cycle and is still in good shape. However, 8 of the filters were constructed in 1989, and we added 4 more in 1998. So as part of this project, we'll also be inspecting the filter underdrain system, which I'll get into a little bit about later, to determine the condition and make any necessary repairs to that system. Next slide. So under normal circumstances, the filters look in this condition, kind of a blue-greenish water being applied on top of the filters, and you can kind of see some of the flock in there as well. Next slide. Under normal backwash, traditionally what we do, obviously, is the filters don't run forever. So the gravity filtration system does require routine backwashing in order to maintain service, depending on flows and also surface loading. As part of this, we backwash with clean water, and as you can see, this is a filter towards the end of a backwash, and the water itself coming over in, spilling into the troughs, kind of in that middle sector there, is very clean. It's almost pristine water and ready to put back into service. Next slide, please. Then the changes happen. Politely put, top photo on the left is the normal Camp Creek inflow water, and what we experienced on the right was subsequent to the January event that we really struggled with. Very high turbid water that initially came in to the lake that we subsequently had to treat. Some parts were well over 100 NTU. Traditionally, the water on the top is around 5 to 10 NTU, somewhere in that ballpark. So 10 times that of the water coming into the lake. Next slide.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
For the people who might be listening, NTU means?
Oh, you would. Thank you. Nephelometric turbidity units. So
Okay.
basically, it's a measurement of the clarity of the water.
Perfect, thank you.
Again. So as part of that very high NTU that's coming into the plant and into the lake, subsequently gets loaded on the filter. So if you remember the photo from before of that bluish greenish haze, now we're into the dark brown, as we call it, yoo-hoo challenges of the water coming in. That flock itself, as you can see, is far more pronounced within that filter, and basically from the color change there. Next slide, please. So subsequent to that backwash photo that I showed before, that's the same filter in a backwash during that high turbidity event. And as you can see, that water flowing over the weir, that is the same source water that we use to backwash the other filter, and that is an extended period. So traditionally on Res A, it's about a 15-minute backwash cycle where we're flushing clean water back through the filter. That is actually at 25 minutes, and it was still not clearing up, and we had to put the filter back into production. Part of the challenge with that is you have initial loading when you put the filter back into production that aggravates and increases the head loss.
And Patrick, I know we have issues with what do we do with the backwash in treatment plant 1? Do we have similar, where does the backwash water on treatment plant A go to?
Yeah, absolutely. Very similar to Res 1. little bit different, though. It is returned back to the headworks of the facility. There is no, obviously, sewer system for us to discharge to occasionally as we do in El Dorado Hills. However, this system actually goes to an equalization basin, and then subsequently we add a non-ionic polymer, essentially another filter aid, to help flock out as that water goes up to the drying beds, and then subsequently it flows through drying beds and returns to the head of the plant. That water itself, which I'll get to in another slide or two, was a great savior for us, oddly, where in tradition, during a normal summer event, if you will, the NTU of the return backwash water is very high. However, during this event, it helped aid us in some, because the ability to actually get it to on that secondary flock, we were returning actually cleaner backwash water subsequently than the source water we were getting from the lake. So all that water, in our sense, is returned. Those drying beds, there's 3 of them. We have 2 in service at all times, with the 3rd being cleaned, usually annually. That solids removal gets removed, and then we put that back in line. In this particular case, during the challenges we were having, we had filter bed, in this case number 2 was out for service. We had that available to bring online if conditions worsened. In the year past, in October of 2021, we had all 3 basins in service when we ran into this challenge. So we were kind of flirting with it back and forth. We ultimately didn't need it during this event.
Thank you.
Next slide. So as Director Dwyer was mentioning, so some of the backwash return water, it's somewhat difficult to see, but I'll read it out. So our source water is shown on the left. That's water coming from Jenkinson Lake, and that's around 76 NTU at the time of this photo. And then the raw water, which is a mix of the backwash as well as the source water, is at 53 NTU. So, it was substantially helping us by 10 NTU units to bring it down. In some cases, that water on the backwash return got up to around 20 NTU, but for the most part, it stayed around 10 on the backwash return for the majority of the challenges we were having. Next slide, please. So, of mention, filters 5 through 8 are the filters we'd like to target to do this media replacement, primarily because of the head loss as well as the age. So this process will include removal of the filter media in whole, inspection of the under drain system, and replacement of the nozzles, which I brought my famed examples. So the nozzle itself is threaded into the under drain system. The media sits on top of this, so you have sand, and then you subsequently have anthracite. These tiny little pores are what the water actually flows through to be filtered and into the system. The little holes on the bottom, which are somewhat hard to see, that's your air purge. So during a backwash, air is forcibly put in one of the stages to actually agitate the media to release all the particles that are trapped within it. These are from 1989, and they're plastic. So what we anticipate seeing as part of this replacement is many of these are probably going to be plugged to some varying degree, obviously with that small slit. One of the challenges, even with the air purge that we continually have at every plant, is that it doesn't get these completely 100% cleaned out. There's still an opportunity for sand or anthracite to build up inside of them. So we'll be replacing 5,616 of these between 4 filters. And we'll also complete inspection of the filter concrete. One of the challenges with the assessment that Corolla is performing for the water treatment plants is that we don't have the ability to get all that media out to actually do a complete review of the filter. We will subsequently be doing that as part of this to roll it into the water treatment plant assessment as well, but it'll be included in this project. Next slide. So the project was bid and advertised on November 10th. A mandatory job walk was performed on December 6th, and the bid opening was opened on December 28th. MPK Solutions was the low bid at $712,733, and the engineer's estimate was $705,700. Next slide, please. So this environmentally has been qualified as a Class 1 categorical exemption of maintenance and repair of existing facilities involving no negligible or expansion of use beyond the existing at this time with the lead agency's determination. Staff has prepared and with board approval will file a notice of exemption of CEQA with the El Dorado County Recorder Clerk's Office. So the funding request today is for MPK Solutions of the $712,733. And option 1 is to award a contract to MPK Solutions in the not-to-exceed amount of $712,733 to replace filter media for the Reservoir A water treatment plant filters 5 through 8, which staff has determined is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, project number T 2022.53. Option 1.
I'll move option 1.
Have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it for, I'd like to ask a question.
I'm going to take
Oh, I'm
Director
sorry.
Anzini's second, but that's okay, now your question.
That's okay.
I mean, assuming that the Caldor fire exasperated this problem,
And the flood.
is there any potential for grant from the Department of Agriculture that the Forest Service works for, supposedly, because of the, I mean, it might be just looking into the potential of getting some kind of a grant relief. I don't know, because of the age of it, it may not apply, but it wouldn't hurt to look.
I know you want to.
I'm not sure I want to, but Patrick, I could tell what I can to try to answer your question. Director Osborne, Dan Corcoran, Operations Director. So the question of the outside funding to help mitigate the challenges of water quality from the Caldor fire. We actually previously looked at this with FEMA and our outside consultant for Res A water quality treatment challenges. They continue to look at it, but it's hard to even deal with the storms after the fire is treated as a separate event to them.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we're kind of in the same boat. But we'll continue to look at it, but I don't have a lot of confidence and ability based upon we're at end of service life, we're actually beyond service life, as Patrick has identified. And it's a maintenance obligation that we need to continue to fund in order to treat water, even absent the fire. We
And nothing ventured, nothing gained. So,
Exactly.
you know.
But we'll continue to look at it, but I think
Okay.
it's come time for this, and probably pretty soon, the next bank of filters where we need to make this investment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had the same thought, same concern. I mean, given the two declarations of emergency, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and you just don't know. So I had a lobbyist friend from DC in town over the weekend, and he said Department of Agriculture is flush with money, and he could get their ear. So anyway, I'm going to continue to talk that with him, and who knows? Anybody else? All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any comment inside? No? Anybody online, Jen?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the instructions on page 2. This is any public comment for action item number 17, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Anzini. President Veerkamp, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote. Thank you, Patrick.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. At this point in the agenda, do you want to recess the meeting and then do our
Financing Corp.
Finance Corporation? So we will recess our regular part of the meeting right now, and we will go into the finance agenda, which,
Do you want to speak to the closed session, and then we'll,
Once we come back into the regular board meeting after the Finance Corporation meeting.
okay, for the record, to comply with the Brown Act, I hereby announce that board members are not receiving additional compensation for this meeting. Oh no, here it is. As the vice president, you can go ahead and open our financing corp.
meeting. Okay, I would
Director
like to
Veerkamp.
call that meeting to order, and roll call, please.
The meeting is called to order at 11:01 a.m. We
need to-
have directors Osborne, Dwyer, Veerkamp, Anzini, and Day present. Secretary Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Mark Price, our Chief Financial Officer, is absent and retired.
Right, and Lori's got a
Can I go ahead and?
Yep, you're the president
I'm the president.
listed.
Yeah. Okay, we're open for nominations to elect officers.
Wait, we have to adopt the agenda,
Oh,
then do
I'm
public
sorry.
comment, and then we'll move through like
Motions
that.
to adopt the agenda,
Moved?
Second.
okay? Anybody online wants to speak, or this is just it?
Members of the public would like to address the board during any comment period, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of the Financing Corp agenda. Director Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda, moved by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Day. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Yes. Members vote?
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Okay, now we'll go to new business. The
Public
Oh,
comment?
public comment? I'm sorry,
not
on
on the agenda.
finance. Yes. Public comment on anything that's not on the agenda.
Director Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the open public comment period for the Financing Corp.
Okay, then we'll move to new business. We'll hear nominations to elect the officers for President, Vice President, Secretary, and Chief Financial Officer. I hear nominations. I personally will nominate Brian Veerkamp to be President of Financial Corp, our Financing Corp.
You can do it all at one. You
Okay.
can do it all in one.
And I'll nominate Director Day to be the vice
But
president.
hold on for a second. We need, if we're going to do separate motions, then we need to vote on them separately. So either Director Anzini can make the full motion or Director Dwyer, however you want to do it, but
Thank you.
Okay.
I recant my first I nominate that we elect for President, Vice President, Secretary, and Chief Financial Officer. That would be Brian Veerkamp, Alan Day.
Jim Abercrombie for secretary.
Huh?
Jim Abercrombie.
Oh,
for
there it is.
secretary.
Jim Abercrombie is Secretary, and Brian Paulson for Council.
okay.
And,
Jamie Bandy,
And Jimmy yeah,
and then,
Mark,
No,
it's
not
not
Mark.
Mark Price.
no.
yeah, we have to have Mark Price because,
He was the original.
yes, so he was the original,
Continue?
excuse me?
We
No.
continue?
What happens is, I know it seems confusing because we did the officers for the regular board, but this is a financing corp, and we have not met since Mark Price has retired. So we just need one motion and one person to say all of the officers with no help from anyone else. So Director Anzini, would you like to continue your motion?
Yes, I would.
To elect Director Veerkamp as president, Director Day as vice
Vice
president,
president.
Jim Abercrombie as secretary,
Secretary.
and Jamie Bandy as chief financial officer.
Yes.
That is your motion. And we're looking for a second to that motion?
Second.
All right. Any members from the, comments from the public? Anybody in the audience? Anybody online?
Director Zini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on new business item number 1, the election of the officers. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Yes. All board members voting?
All board members are voting. Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously. At this point, President Veerkamp, you could call for new business item number 2.
Okay, now I will call for our item number 2, which is the approval of the minutes, the January 10th, 2022 meeting.
I'll move for approval of the minutes.
Okay, so option 1. Had a motion and a second. Any discussion in the public? Any online?
It does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on new business item number 2, approval of the January 10th, 2022 meeting. Option 1 moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Day. I believe we're ready for the vote.
please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. At this
Yep.
point, then,
Can you please adjourn the Financing Corporation meeting?
yes, I will adjourn the Finance Corporation meeting, and we will now go back into our regular meeting.
At 11:07 a.m.
And I believe council has comments or wants to talk about closed session for us real quick.
Thank you, President Veerkamp. The board will be meeting in closed session to discuss one matter as reflected on today's agenda as closed session item A. I anticipate that the board's consideration of this item will require at least 20 minutes.
All right, we will now recess into closed session, and we'll be coming out.
We'll recess into closed session. We will not return prior to 11:30 a.m. However, it could be after. And for the purposes of this Zoom meeting, we will close this Zoom meeting and reopen once we return after closed session.
All right. Reflect that we've come out of closed session, and county council. Council Polson, will you please speak to that matter?
Yeah, thanks very much, President Veerkamp. The board, as you indicated, met in closed session to consider closed session item A. And I have one action to report. On a unanimous vote from a motion made by Director Dwyer, seconded by Director Veerkamp, the board authorized me to refer this matter to outside counsel and to hire Tim Del Castillo from the Castle Law Firm to represent the district on this matter. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. We have review of assignments.
Just direction to, well, hold on, I think we may have one. I believe it's all direction to staff, but Director Dwyer asked for the solar, but it's on an upcoming meeting already, so we'll consider that direction to staff. I don't have anything outside of direction to staff.
All right. Anything else from anybody? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
At 12:10, thank you.